In this video, I'm going to show and explain the metaphysics behind length contraction and time dilation, how it came about, and how it's used to this day to pull the wool over our eyes, and hopefully it'll be obvious to people who pay attention. So from the mid-18 to the late 1800s through the 1900s, really still to this day, but back then the debate was at its peak whether the earth was in motion or the heavens were in motion. So again, in the late 1800s, there was a physicist slash inventor called Albert Michelson who set out to prove the Earth's absolute motion in space, or disprove. And he invented, which is still used to this day, the interferometer, which was 10 times more sensitive than necessary to detect the Earth's motion around the sun if it existed. But before that, there was a test called Airy's failure, and it's called a failure because they got a null result trying to detect the Earth's motion, and it was simple but ingenious, and it's on screen. I'll give a quick breakdown. So nothing against Malcolm Bowditch, whose animation is on screen now. Shout out to him, in fact. But the ether being stationary or even existent or non-existent has no effect on the success or failure of this test or the Michelson-Morley test. So even if light is a particle leaving the star, we're going to get the same result as it comes through the telescope. So to me, them even involving the existence or non-existence of the ether is just another way for them to muddy the waters. So let's just say the light's leaving the star, and the stars, so if stars are stationary and the telescope is stationary, then you won't have to tilt it at all. But in reality, if you're looking at faraway objects, if they are traveling, or if you're traveling, you have to tilt your telescope slightly. And it's like a few degrees for the stars. You have to tilt your telescope to see them in the center of the telescope. So if it's the stars moving, then the particles or the ether, whatever you want to call it, has already left the star and is on its way down to the telescope. And so you would expect to have to tilt the telescope. Or if the telescope is moving, meaning the Earth is moving with the telescope sitting on it, and the light leaves the star, again, you'd have to tilt it. So the fact you have to tilt it shows something is in motion. So what Airy's came up with was a test where he slowed down the light by putting water in the telescope, and he should have had to have tilted it a little bit more due to the fact the light slowing down, but he did not have to, showing that the light already left the star and was on its track, and the stars just kept on going, but the light that left it was already on its path, so we didn't have to tilt the telescope any further. So if we had a way to slow light down to 1 inch per minute, and the light's already on a path, it doesn't matter how much we slow it down, it's going to go straight down the center of the telescope. But if it's the telescope moving, we slow it down that much, and the star's going to show up on the side of the center frame, or worse, not even make it to the eyepiece. So you wouldn't even see it if it's the Earth moving. So a quick breakdown of the Michelson-Morley for people who've never heard of it. It's a test where they send light down a pathway, and then by using a half-silvered mirror, reflects the light into two different pathways, and then they recombine it to where it hits a plate and measures the interference. In other words, if the timing of one beam is altered due to the motion of the interferometer, then you will get displacement, and you can measure that through an interference pattern. And what they got in the Michelson-Morley was a null result. They got a solid beam in the center, as you see on screen here. When they went into this experiment with the Earth's motion around the sun as like some kind of known fact, and so they had a prediction, and it was wrong. They got a null result, and they weren't willing to throw out the motion of the Earth. So from 1887 to 1905, they really had no explanation at all until 1905 special relativity, where it's pretty much claimed that the apparatus shrank. The apparatus moving the same direction, the arm of the just the arm of the apparatus moving the same direction of the Earth around the sun shrank, and therefore time dilated in that direction, just a tiny bit, enough to explain the null result. So instead of accepting the results of the experiment, they literally threw them out to maintain the Earth's motion around the sun, which is where science kind of forked. And today, mainstream, they'll say that these tests proved there was no ether. But once again, even if light is particles, the interferometer works the way it does, and so does the Aries failure test. It's what the light is of no relevance to the results. So that is a non-explanation. It's just, once again, part of the way they muddy the waters. So to kind of get ahead of myself, but what they've done now is they've literally defined the meter based on the speed of light, because you got to have a constant when you're doing measurements of anything, basically in physical reality. You got to have a constant. So like with speed is distance over time. So if motion is not absolute, then distance is not absolute, or time is not absolute. You got to have something absolute. So if you're going 10 miles per hour, if the miles aren't set in stone, then nothing can be set in stone. You got to have some kind of constant. So by making the speed of light the constant, they can adjust to any reference frame and pretty much falsely prove anything they want. It's kind of ridiculous. So Michelson went on to do other experiments, as well as Sagnac, and they proved through the similar experiments, similar equipment, that there was a rotation detected, but it's not the Earth's motion. They did get 6/6 of the expected fringe pattern. And I'll let Ron Hatch tell you, there's a video from a few years back where he had to help fix GPS systems to get it to work properly. And he went through the math and went over everything, and he shows the engineering documents that it's not the Earth's rotation.
Okay, a little more one-way Sagnac effect on the Earth. The measurement is the result of Earth's rotation around the Earth. I claim that that's absolutely false. Wang has done some experiments with conveyor belts and shown that their circular equation right there is really equivalent to the length and can be put in terms of the length. Well, on one-way path, you'd expect it to be half as big. The GPS experts claim, there's this triangle that it follows, and they put it in the same form for a one-way because of Earth's rotation. But again, if you work it out, it turns out it's just VL over C squared. And when you put it in terms of where the satellite and receiver are, it works out to be exactly the same as that VX distance along the equator. And so there's clock biases that have to be accounted for in GPS to remove the Sagnac effect. Everybody asks why there isn't one for orbits. Well, there isn't one for orbits because they're all affected by the same amount. You just adjust your clocks. The clocks have been adjusted and are automatically kept that way from the argument we've already given. A little bit more proof of that is GPS has to include all receiver motion in the effect, rotational, and not whether it's just rotational or not. And that's the ICD document that claims that that's the case. So again, it's not a rotation, it's a fact that the receiver and source are moving. Which incidentally, I came across a paper a long time ago, I haven't checked on it recently, when they tried to compute precise orbits with radar of the planets. They did not get the right values, and they tried it with and without Einstein's theories, and it didn't work either way very well. I claim that they're not taking into account this flattening effect, and the speed of light changes as a function of direction here. The length contraction is different in different directions. And incidentally, that'll cause a very tiny change in your VLBI measurement of the milliarc seconds. So there's some fun things that they don't account for that I believe we're beginning to see the residual effects of that.
So when Toon and FTFE and all these clowns try to act like they have radar measurements to these heavenly bodies up there, they're full of shit. You hear it from the horse's mouth that they did not get correct distances, or else not correct according to their model. So whatever direction the measurement's taking place, they claim time dilation. They have to do this with these satellites because they have the Earth growing in size as it extends out from the ground. So they write that off mathematically as time dilation. And think about it. If the satellites are curved relative to one another, or traveling a curved path relative to a curved surface, that's the same math as is flat relative to each other, or traveling a flat circuit over a flat ground, but you still have the time to deal with. You'll have time discrepancies to deal with. Let me try and put it to you like this. If you have two receivers on the ground 100 miles apart on a flat earth and satellites directly over each one of them, then the satellites up above are also going to be 100 miles apart. But on a fictitious globe surface, two receivers on the ground 100 miles apart, depending on how high the satellites are, you got to dilate time to fix that. Because on a globe, they're going to be farther apart the higher they get. So they have to claim that the closer you get to the Earth's surface, the slower time moves to account for this discrepancy. And so in other words, the higher you get, the more of a distance discrepancy you have to make up for. And they're using time to do that. But I hope I explained it good. Thank you for watching.
We need your globe just like a moose needs a hat rack. We need your outer space like a steaming pile of shit stack. We don't need your globe. We don't need your model. We don't want your globe. We don't want your model. Where on God's green earth did you come up with this model? Why was this ever taught to you? Then tell us why you retarded. Tell us why you retarded. Please 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 tell us why you retarded. Where on God's green earth did you come up with this model? Why was this ever taught to you? Then tell us why you retarded. Tell us why you retarded. Please tell us why you retarded. Please tell us why you retarded. Please tell us why